recording this. I probably will not stay in front of this. So, Michael, do you guys call him Michael? Mr. Ricadio? He asked me to come and speak. So I'm going to be doing your lecture today. I understand you guys absolutely need a break about halfway through. Does that sound right? So 4:30-ish is okay. And then a goal to end by 6, hopefully sooner. I assume that's always okay. Yes? Is this your last class of the day? Oh, you have class at 6 here in this building? Okay. Well, I'll try and make sure you guys have a little bit of break before that. So I'm Valerie. I've done this before. I have my MSW. I do have it through Cal State, though. No booing. And then I also have my MPA through Cal State also. Tell me what your name was?
Johnny.
Johnny asked what the MPA is, Master's in Public Administration. I'll probably fall on this. So after, I've been with San Bernardino County 17 years, with child welfare 15 years. So after, at some point, you're not doing social work anymore. You're running a business. So I decided a few years ago to go back to school and get my MPA to learn about all the stuff that you don't learn in MSW school, like budgets and staffing and all that boring stuff. Because at some point, pretty much management and above, you're not working with clients. There's a parallel process, but I needed to go and learn that stuff. So that's why I have that. I'm a manager. I don't think I wrote that down. I'm totally old school, so I'm going to write a lot on the board. There is no PowerPoint. There are some handouts we're going to go over. I know there are a few missing, and we have some copies right here. I think it's who's all missing a copy?
I just need one.
You just need one? Okay, and then some of the back row I think I missed. Thank you. So those are some things we're going to touch on. Like, I know you're going to read ahead. It will and will not make sense. I might look at some of these extra in case I forget. I'll look right here. And is this somebody's right here on the end?
Yes.
Oh, someone's coming. Okay, perfect. So I know at the beginning, you guys are probably do you guys all know each other rather well? Is this a cohort?
Yes.
Yeah, so you guys all know each other. But unfortunately, I'm going to have you introduce yourself to me. I know, it's awful. So just you guys are all MSW, right?
Yeah.
What year? First year? First and second? Just first? So second would be you're getting ready to graduate, right? No one's graduating in a month? No. Like everybody's like sad. No. Okay, so all first year. And internships? Yes? None with the county, right? Nope, because that's all second year. So if you could just tell me your name, I am going to ask you to tell me something you do for self-care. I hope you have something, because we're going to end about self-care. I'm going to write the programs I manage. They're all super heavy, including child death. We'll end with that. Yeah. Well, no, actually, we'll end with self-care, because I try not to be awful. But we are going to talk about some child death stuff. I have an interesting sense of humor, but that's how we stay alive in social work. But I'll try not to make any inappropriate jokes, but we are going to talk about some child death. So that's why I'm having you say something about self-care, and then we'll wrap it up with that. Make sense? Okay? Who wants to start? How about back row? I'm sure the front row always has to start, right? How about you in the back? So just name and what you like to do to take care of yourself.
Okay, so my name is Emmanuel. We call me Manny.
Okay.
For self-care, I drink Kool-Aid.
You drink Kool-Aid? It can be a good or bad coping mechanism. I know it's being recorded, but maybe Michael will like dub that part out.
For self-care, I do one of two things. I like to exercise because when I exercise, I like going by myself. Specifically, running outside. It's something about running by myself in the morning on the trail that relaxes me and clears my mind.
Nice.
So that's something that I like to do.
Yeah, thank you, Danny.
Kristen, honestly, I sleep a lot. That's the main thing. Yeah.
Understood as a grad student.
I'm Brittany. I like to hike and also play guitar.
Good.
I'm Nikia and probably just hang out with them.
Great.
I'm swimming probably listening to church.
I'm Luis. I like to play soccer.
Nice.
I'm Matt, and I like to play golf and listen to music.
I'm Jose, and I enjoy reading.
Cool.
Just picked up.
I'm Crystal, and I have a lot of little self-cares. I'm on the floor, so the main one I do is I listen to music, and it's a lot of well, during the day.
Yeah, but it gives you some time.
I'm Ina, and I go to the gym, and I go hiking on weekends.
I'm Yasmin and I like to listen to music.
Joanna, and I like
And what was it?
journaling.
Journaling. Okay, great.
I'm Michelle. I also like to journal for self-care and sometimes I do meditations.
Cool.
I'm Angela, and I like to listen to music and read.
Good.
I'm Steven, I like to listen to music.
Lori, I'm also a huge napper.
Nice.
Hi, my name is Crystal, and besides music, I like to go off-roading.
Oh, cool.
My name's Taryn, and I like binge watching TV shows.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
My name is Luis. I like to exercise and play
Good.
My name is Issa. I like to rock climb.
Oh, that's cool.
My
Wow.
name is Stephanie. I like to shop.
That's self-care.
My name is Maddie. I like to run or just be outside anywhere in the sun.
Nice.
My name is Alexia, and I like ending my day with a little therapy.
Oh, okay.
My name's Johnny, and I like to power lift with our coworkers.
Oh, good. Very good.
My name is Haley, and stay connected with my faith.
Nice. And one more in the back that joined us.
Maria, and I go to the gym and have my 2 hours on it.
Good. Michael, you want to say what you like to do for self-care?
Yeah, I volunteer at a meditation center.
Oh, cool.
I garden and a lot, like hours, and then binge eat.
Oh, absolutely.
That one's
Right.
not as great, but it's fun.
But it's reality. So we'll kind of touch back on those things as we wrap up. That's my goal. You'll see that's the last handout. I already told you a little bit about me. So 15 years in child welfare with San Bernardino. I started as, hi! I know. Nikila, would you like to say what you like to do for self-care?
Imagine.
Ooh, that was good. So I know Nikila. So I've been with the department 15 years, with the county 17 years. I started as what we call a social worker 2. It used to be a classification that before you had your master's, you could do as a social worker. I worked back-end cases, which we consider kids that were in long-term foster care, doing some family finding, trying to kind of get them connected to guardianship. Then I got my master's and I became an intake worker at our central region, which is downtown San Bernardino. I think I worked intake for about 4 years. Then I went to court and did some what we call a court officer position, where you're kind of a liaison between the judge and the department as social workers come in and out of court, also assisting county counsel. That was a great gig. I probably could have died there. It was so amazing. But I decided I wanted to do more. That's when I went back to school and got my MPA. Within that time, I promoted to supervisor at our Gifford office, where normally our interns are housed. And I had a blended unit, which is a combination of intake and carriers, so front end and back end workers. And then I recently promoted 2 years ago to a manager of a brand new position that we're calling risk management. And this is where I get to write all the fun programs. So litigation, I'll touch base on that in a second. Records requests. CDRT, which stands for Child Death Review Team. Fatalities and near fatalities. Khaki grievances. And probably some other stuff, but this is like the main important stuff that we're going to at least touch on a little bit of these things. And then if you guys have any questions about any of this stuff or anything, you know, feel free to stop me, interrupt me, raise your hand, whatever you guys feel comfortable with. I want you guys to ask lots of questions, get whatever you need from me. Anything before we move forward? No? Okay. So I'm going to talk about some of the ethical dilemmas that we face being a social worker. I'm going to kind of go from social worker to manager. So going back, and I'm going to tell you about some old stories and weave in the law and some ethical dilemmas. And then coming to more current stuff that I'm facing right now that have to deal with ethical dilemmas and how the law plays a part. Sound okay? Yes? Have you guys already reviewed the NASW Code of Ethics? Yeah, done. That was like beginning of class. So that's good. That's what you always hold on to. Does everybody a member of NASW? Most, yeah. Oh, pretty good. Everybody have liability insurance? They offer it.
How much is it?
It's not very much. I want to say it's like $100 and something a year. Or does that sound like a lot?
No.
Oh, okay. And I think it's like 1 million, 2 million coverage. It's pretty decent. But something to be, I was just kind of curious. So going back to I was a social worker, one of the things, so I went to the training unit. Like I said, I was a social worker too before, so I had some knowledge of how the department worked, how to use the database. And I go into my first intake unit, and I have to remove a child. And I remove the child, and I write my petition, which is basically your court report to tell the judge why you removed this child. This is pre-warrants. Right now we do warrants. So this is my report telling the judge that I had these concerns regarding this family. And I'm kind of long-winded, as you'll probably see, but I also like to tell the whole story. I think it's important not to leave any of the facts out. Not that I was saying, like, on a sunny day, today there was a rainbow and a bird outside. But I like to put all the details in there. You know, the parent said this, child said this, on and on and on. And I really held close to that because I was really committed to our code of ethics and being ethical and honest. And I want to present the whole story to the judge. And my supervisor was gone, and my covering supervisor, which you'll experience, said, Valerie, this is long. This is way too long. When you tell the story, which we call prima facie, that's a legal term, it needs to be half a page to a page. Well, my story was not going to fit in half a page to a page. But I have a directive from my supervisor. So it's kind of like this. It's one of my first ethical dilemmas. What do you do? What are your guys' thoughts? What happens when you're being asked to cut something down to you feel like unreasonable proportion. So you have to weigh it, you know. Any ideas? Any thoughts about how people feel about that? Yeah, please.
So this is your, like you said, your first ever,
First one.
and you're like, I'm great, you know, facts in there. Of course, they've done them a lot, right?
Yep.
So they kind of know their perspective. But yes, this isn't ethical dilemma. I don't know. Maybe some compromise. Maybe some like, hey,
Perfect.
I think you're taking out too much. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe some editing of where do you think my fluffy parts are, you know, maybe do some editing. And I think that's ultimately what we came down to. But it really kind of shaped me as a supervisor, especially supervisor over intake unit. They started out blended, but then I had an all intake unit. And I never, as long as it wasn't like on a bright, shiny, sunny day and the wind was blowing, I never minded how long it was. Because if the social worker took the time to write it and do the work, which is, like, let's not even talk about that. Like, they had to do all those things, and then write all those things down. As long as it looked good, and, you know, there are some minor rules that we're not supposed to have in petitions. I was fine with it because they did all the work. Might take me a couple extra minutes to read. So length was never a concern because to me, I wanted the social worker to put all the facts into that document. And I later went on to learn is having those really complete court reports is what kept you off the stand. So testifying, which is one of the things as social workers, like, we never want to do. Michael, have you ever testified? Yes. Nikila, have you?
Yes.
But Nikila, how long have you been a social worker?
18.
Yes. So have I. Only twice, though. You think having some depth and putting everything in those reports leads to that?
Some death, yes.
Yeah.
All the words, everybody knows.
All the words.
Yes.
And like I said, doing all that work is a lot. But I learned that doing those complete reports will keep you off the stand. There's always going to be a few times on some ugly case that you're going to have to testify. It's just the way our legal system works. It's, you know, their due diligence. Sometimes they have the right to testify, the right to cross-examination. So you just prepare yourself for that. And as long as you know you did your best, you were ethical, you were honest, you're fine. You know, you just get up there and tell the truth. Like the bailiff swears you in. It's no big deal. But it was really, yes, John, please.
With your, like, in situations like that, though, like, the legal team, like, prepares you, right?
With county counsel, yeah. So especially in your first, probably several trials, I had several new workers. I would call county counsel and I would say, hey, you know, Johnny's new, he's never testified before. You have to be really pointed with them. I need you to set some time before the trial to meet, you know, with so-and-so. You have to be pretty direct like that because they have big caseloads and there's a lot of social workers and they're pretty good at knowing everybody, but you need to be real direct, like, what are they going to ask me? What should I do? What should I prepare? But absolutely. But, yeah, it seems a little scary, right?
Can I add something really quick?
Yeah,
so,
of course.
Loma Linda, at least they did when I was here, I think they still do in the summer, they offer an expert witness class, and I highly recommend you do it. The reason that I had to, and because you might say, well, I'm not going to go to CPS, but the time that I had to go on trial, so I technically wasn't on trial because I wasn't a social worker, I was a clinician for the mom, and I couldn't support her, and they just were like, you have to. And I hadn't read, I hadn't prepared because I wasn't thinking, I just was there to support her. And that class helped me a lot. I still had some things because there's a specific way we need to think and respond, and that class was invaluable at that point. And so even if you're not CFS, because that's the only time I've had to go on the stand, I wasn't CFS.
Yeah.
They knew I was previously, but I wasn't at that moment. So it's worth looking at for your life.
That's a good point, because we get a lot of subpoenas for criminal court. So let's say you're the social worker on the case, it could not even have to do with your child or your case. Criminal court might want to subpoena you as a witness, and they're going to, whether you work for the county or you're just hanging out at your house, like, and used to work, they're going to find you and ask you to testify. So it's a good skill to brush up on, because it is, you know, like I said, there are some tricks to the trade that you just want to be mindful of. Is there a question over here? No, just stretching. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. The next case I wanted to talk about, when this is pretty common, working downtown San Bernardino, there was a lot of poverty. And another thing I didn't learn in social work school was about diabetic children. No one in my family has diabetes. I learned to spell ketoacidosis. I'm still not quite sure what it means, but I mean, it means your blood sugar's high. But you get referrals regarding, so one of the referral in question was this little guy, I think he was elementary school, maybe 6, 7, 8, was having a lot of issues with his diabetes. And the concern, I think the way it was written was family is non-compliant. You know, they're not cooperative, they're feeding this little guy junk, you know, this isn't good. So that's a basic general neglect referral. And I think at this point I worked like a gazillion of these. So I know I'm going to take my public health nurse because I'm a social worker. I'm not quite sure about the blood sugar and all that stuff. And I get out to the home, and it's a Spanish-speaking family. So I got to come back because I didn't bring an interpreter. And because that's appropriate, right? That's absolutely ethical. Do not try any, I kind of speak Spanish once in a while, or I don't know, right? People try crazy things. Just go get an interpreter. It's the best thing. And it's civil rights violation, most importantly. And so I come back with an interpreter, and I start working with family and the child. And the service provider, we will call them, had never provided an interpreter to them. So it was like foreign, this new information I'm telling them. So I call my reporting party, and I'm a social worker. I kind of front them off a little bit. Like, you know, what have you been doing with this family? Because bottom line, what the family needed was some basic education on eating, exercise, counting, I can't remember, something, keeping a food log, really basic. Like, was this a CPS case? No, like, absolutely not. This was a basic medical social worker could do. So I front them off a little bit. You know, that probably doesn't go real well. That's in my more assertive, aggressive social work days where I'm frustrated because I think this family could have been handled a certain way. And I think at this point, like I said, I'd worked multiple referrals like this, and it just felt like you're not providing families with reasonable services. There's kind of this disparity of not even trying to meet the family where they are, not even giving them an interpreter, where you're telling them, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And then when they don't do it, you're calling CPS that they're uncooperative. It's just, you know, bottom line, it's not fair. You know, it's not okay. So I think me and my public health nurse, we worked with them for a long time to get, and it was a lot of education, but it was needed, and I felt like the service providers were not going to do it. So let me do it to help this mom get this kid's blood sugar in control. But that's common, and that's one example. There's, you know, probably hundreds, thousands more. It was just one that really always touched base with me because I was just really frustrated in working with some service providers. But instead of providing those reasonable services to the family, call CPS, it's just kind of crappy. Thoughts on that? Agreement, it's kind of crappy?
I have a question for
Yeah,
you,
of course.
if you want to. How you said that was your more aggressive social work phase. So what did you learn about being aggressive or direct? Like, what has it changed or is it?
Well, as you promote, you have to maybe think a little bit more before you speak. There's something about being politically savvy. I still get myself in trouble. But I want to continue to promote. So it's sometimes figuring out that finesse of how do I get my message across in a way that leadership will hear it, but still advocating. At this point now, I'm advocating for social workers, not advocating for my clients anymore. That's where I said it's still very similar. It's just a different advocacy. But I mean, sometimes you just, I'm born a social worker. My parents will tell you that. So I was born arguing with people like at a very young age. So I like to push back. It's appropriate. So one thing I was going to add regarding my little diabetic kid is, okay, let's say I'm not the world's greatest social worker. And I'm like, you know what? This mom's not cooperative. They're not compliant. They're feeding the kid X, Y, and Z. I didn't say, this is my email address. This is the preferred way to get a hold of me. This phone I sit at sometimes when I have time to sit by the phone. But if you need anything, please email me or call me. It rolls over to a secretary, so someone will answer it. So let's say I'm going to detain this child, which is like, that's the worst thing in the world. Like, I'm going to detain this child even though we haven't provided appropriate services. But some people do. It happens. But there's this statement on your report to the court. We have some auto language, meaning it pre-populates. This is where I have my old school days of writing on the board. I'll get out of the way. It goes on to say a few more things, and you're supposed to say what you did. So reasonable efforts were made to prevent or eliminate the need for the child's removal from the home. This comes in your petition, your report to the court, and the social workers write what they did. It usually talks about crisis intervention, pre-placement preventative services, so on and so forth. But if I haven't done anything, I'm probably still going to write some stuff down there. But I'm signing that court report saying I tried. I worked with this family. I did X, Y, and Z. Again, kind of coming back to the ethics. And we'll talk about when you sign court reports in a minute. I feel like you have to do something, You should do something. What did you try and implement? So this is in every removal of every petition, every child that we do. I would assume it's the same for any other county because the Welfare and Institution Code says you have to try and prevent a removal. And it's in the best interest of the child. It's not always the best thing to remove children. When we get into litigation, I'm going to talk a little bit about abuse in foster care. And that's part of the reason, so you're always kind of weighing that, especially if you've been a social worker in the department for a long time, like Hila and I, you've seen, a removal that then the child gets hurt worse in foster care. And that's ugly. So I really hold this, and I'm a conservative supervisor, meaning I'm not anti-removal, but I take this to heart. Like, people need to do something. So on our little diabetic kid, you just go out and do nothing. And you're like, yeah, we're moving that kid. It's not appropriate. He was failed by his service provider, and he's failed by, the department, when it really could be an easy fix. Just linking him up to services and somebody that's going to listen and work with the family. Any questions on that? Fun, right? Yes.
So what would reasonable efforts be if there are a lot of marks and bruises on a child and you're worried about if you don't have enough time to give the family services?
So a lot of marks and bruises like what? Like bruising?
Like intentional abuse.
Like marks from a belt?
Sure.
Okay, so did you go out and interview the family? Yes. Okay. So I would say is you're conducting an investigation, interviewing all the appropriate parties. That's a broad question. You really have to look into what was going on. And we'll talk a little bit towards the end about penal codes and the Welfare and Institution Code. But a mark and a bruise on a child, just that, it's in your packet, that is enough to substantiate an allegation. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to remove the child. Then you're working, can I do something, parenting class, I don't know, anger management, just drug treatment, depends what the issues of the family are, domestic violence. Is there a service I can put in place that would prevent me removing this child? Yay or nay. It just depends on the situation, but that doesn't mean the child wasn't physically abused. So it could go, yes, the child could be physically abused. That doesn't mean do not pass go straight to foster care. This is an automatic removal. But that's a piece I think we're still not great as a department. We still kind of mess up those decisions. Because I think it sometimes feels like they left a mark or a bruise. I got to remove a child. No, maybe you can work on it. I'm trying to think of an example. One will come to me. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Kind of.
There's a lot of different examples.
It's such a huge variety, Nikila.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have a child with a mark or a bruise, it depends on, is it a pattern, is it isolated, are they willing to use alternative discipline methods, is there a protective parent in the home, the vulnerabilities, the age, any type of special needs, non-verbal. We take all those things into consideration. So just because they have a bruise, like Valerie said, does not mean we have to remove. It could have been isolated. If you think about it, you get spanked, you're moving.
Yeah.
I didn't intend to hit you on your back. I intended to hit you on your butt, but the department doesn't look at the intent. We look at what the outcome was. There is a bruise, and then we have to do it.
Yeah, intent is another sticky thing, because I've interviewed so many parents where you can tell they really didn't intend to leave a mark or a bruise. Especially like me, I mean, you could give me a red mark right now, and like the parent will be like, they're telling you, oh, I didn't mean to do that. And they're so cooperative. They're so willing to engage in services. You could tell the remorse. Are we going to substantiate physical abuse on them? Possibly. Is that an appropriate case for removal? Probably not, because that family's, it seems so workable. And that very little baby synopsis of an example. Families are so much more rich and so many more details going on. So the last case, oh, I'm sorry, did you have a question? No. Okay. The last case I want to talk about as a social worker, and it was a pretty defining case for me, it was a no FR case that I got. And I give you the front page as no FR codes. So that means no family reunification. No, thank you. So that means if one of those things, I think there's 16, qualifies in your case, you have grounds not to offer this parent's family reunification services. And you can see this is per the WIC code, the Welfare and Institution Code. It has it all there for you in case you ever need to reference it. Some social workers know these by the back of their hand. I'm not so great at them. I know the last one is if they are a sex offender, which is a newer one, only because we have a county council, Steve Bass, that actually advocated for that. He lobbied for that. So that's grounds for no FR. So what no FR means really is we feel that this is so bad, this situation is so bad, the department's not going to pay for services for you to reunify for your children. You could go and work a plan on your own and file what we call a 388 in court and say, hey, I did it on my own, I got my stuff together. But asking for no FR is usually reserved for the really bad cases. So the case I'm going to talk to you about is number 5, and it's sadly one of the most common NOFR codes. And it's when there's a child with an E allegation, severe physical abuse to a child under 5. So I get this case for JD. I got to write a jurisdiction dispositional report. And that's the first report after the child's already been removed. And my job is to look at the allegations and are they true or not true? And based on that, what am I going to do with this? Do I think the parents should reunify? Should we offer them services? What needs to happen to make sure this child doesn't stay in foster care? Are we connecting them to adoption, legal guardianship? We think it's the best interest to reunify. So this was a 2-month-old from a really religious home in Colton. The religion had it just played a key component in this case. Mom and dad were young parents. They lived with her mom and dad and her brother. So there's maternal family in the home. And mom woke up in the middle of the night to her 2-month-old brand new baby crying, blood everywhere in the living room. And dad had basically just beaten this baby. So a torn frenulum, which is this little thing that connects your lip to your inside of your lip. A kidney that no longer worked, a lacerated spleen, some rib fractures, a brain injury. So it was ugly. It was an ugly, messy case. Dad gets arrested. So dad, I hate to say it, but it's a pretty easy decision. We know he's the one that caused the harm to the child. So for me, no FR, bam. But then I'm trying to figure out with mom, and this is where you're doing all your social work. And I spent hours with her because I'm trying to figure out the allegation against her is that she knew or reasonably should have known. That's a lot, right? Like, did she have a crystal ball? Did she suspect anything about this guy? So that's when we start looking at his history. And he has no history, which is, yeah, it absolutely is scarier. And it makes it more of a mystery. So he has no criminal history, no mental health concerns, no abuse as a child. His parents say he's amazing. They live with the maternal family. They don't have any concerns about him. And it's like, how did this happen? How does this happen? Well, then I get a little clue, and I forget how I got the clue. But mom had taken some pictures of baby, and baby had gouge marks right here. Like if you made, gouge marks into a little tiny 2-month-old tummy. And for whatever reason, she showed me these pictures. And then I think baby had a mark right here. So what our doctors would say is a curvilinear mark. So it looks like a fingernail. And same thing right here. And that's how you get rib fractures. So that wasn't nice, but sorry. But that's what people do, sadly. So that's a clue. And I'm like, Mom, what's with these marks on this brand new baby? Because babies don't have marks. Who's the mom in here? Right here? Yeah. Oh, another mom? Yeah. So brand new babies, they're not cruising. They're just laying there. They don't get gouge marks from falling off, nothing. It just doesn't happen. And we know, and our child abuse doctors know, those are signs of physical abuse. So again, social work in it. Mom, what happened here? Oh, I noticed that at bath time. God, just me telling this story makes me so traumatized, I'll tell you. But that happened at bath time, and I'm like, you didn't have any concerns? The baby had these gouge marks? I think she noticed it at bath time. She knew she didn't do it. She knew it was the husband. Well, it's our new baby. He just didn't know how to handle the child. And as a youngish, newish social worker, I'm like, Now, years later, I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? because I'm in this ethical dilemma of, do I go no FR on her? One, I have this picture, I have my clue. That's probably enough to get me no FR on her. I feel like I'm paid an argument that, hey, a brand new baby with little gouge marks. She didn't call a doctor, didn't seek medical treatment, didn't ask her mom, nothing. But the other thing is the best interest of the child. And did she really know? So I only have 3 weeks to write this report. So I went back and forth, and I think I even maybe changed my recommendation. I decided to offer family reunification services. And I'll tell you, when I made that recommendation, I felt good in my social work soul that it was the right thing to do. And it goes to a trial. That case is going to go to a trial because there's a attorney representing our little baby who has lost a kidney, has a brain injury, needs all these services, got this wacko dad in jail. And mom, she is amazing. She was my favorite client, so I'm going to get to the punchline of my story. But she created a child abuse class. She was extremely high functioning. She did all her services in a very short amount of time. She was a dream. So, I'm feeling good in my social work soul. I did the right thing. I won the trial. Yes, mom gets FR. Dad, no FR. Get out of here. So, our wonderful criminal system that you have to have somebody else come and talk to you about. I think he got 3 years in jail, which I still don't quite understand this all the time. He got a very short amount of time in jail. So by that time, the case has moved on to another worker. I'm sleeping again at night. I'm peaceful. Case is closed. She reunifies. It's all good because she did what she needed to do. And I get notified by a peer of mine. He got out of jail. She let him back in the house. And he beat up that kid again. You guys aren't groaning more? Oh, I just gave myself a stomach ache. Oh, God, it made me sick. So our little guy's 3. And I think he kind of goes to your question. Whoops him, causes marks and bruises all up and down his thigh and his butt. So I'm furious, obviously. I don't know about it till a ways into the case, but I'm furious at that client that I entrusted, that I went on a stand for. I feel like I laid myself out there for. I'm super upset with that little baby that, man, both your parents, dude. This is awful. We invested so much in mom. And she came up with this cockamamie story about, she called somebody, the probation officer, and they said he could live in the home. Yeah, baloney, whatever, baloney. So he went back to jail, I think only for a little bit of time. Also, we had to remove the baby from her. But she's high functioning, She's, at this point, I'm going to say savvy, manipulative, because I'm done with her. This is the reality of our social work lives. I'm done with her. I know she's going to reunify again because she did it the first time. The first time was harder. And I think she did. And I just hope that little guy doesn't get hurt a third time. I didn't check before I came to this class. It gave me more of a stomach ache. I probably have to go to court and testify myself for this woman, against her. But it was awful. Huh? What'd you say? So the ethical dilemma with the legal was my first choice. I could have went no FR on her. I had the legal proof. I could have asked for that because I had those pictures. I still provided all those pictures to the court. That's why I went to a trial, because I'm sure even the judge and everybody was like, ooh, what do we do? What do we do? So it goes to a full trial. But I really stood by, I feel good. I think we should offer mom FR, And it, like I said, it was a hard decision. I did feel fully great about that until I heard about that little guy's second injury. But that's going to happen. You're going to make hard decisions that keep you up at night, that make you work 18 hours a day, that make you consult with every single friend you've ever had that knows social work and that knows child welfare. Because it's an undoable decision. You know, you're making a decision about a family's life. And when you see the injuries and the child and the parents, you know, I think as social workers, we want to believe in what's good in people, and that's why it makes it really difficult, you know. You don't want to think that mom's going to endanger this child. It's like, it's almost incomprehensible. It's like, no way. You know, maybe this dad, like, we're done with the dad. But mom, no way. She's going to protect this child. Not that moms don't hurt their kids. They do. I give you 50 examples of those. It's just, she wasn't the one that hurt him, so she's workable. But it's hard, and you're going to make those ethical dilemmas. But again, you just think it through, do your best, make an honest recommendation to the court. Ultimately, it was in the court's hands. The court made a decision. We did follow my recommendation. And that's a good thing about trial. You lay it all out there, you tell the truth, somebody else makes a decision. It's on the judge. Let the judge make the decision. Does that make sense? Any questions? How do you guys feel about that awful case? God, you guys look so depressed. It's only going to get more depressing. Yes?
So that was early on in your social work career?
Yeah.
So if you would have got that same case 10 years later, would you have done the same thing?
No, I'd go no FR on mom.
Automatically.
Yeah. And, you know, that happens as you get, it's a few different things. This is my last week that I'm managing our Children's Assessment Center, which is a partnership. Have you been there?
Yeah. I
Okay.
had a
Internship?
10-month-old that had to go there that I was case managing for.
Oh, okay. I thought you looked familiar. Maybe I saw you though. But being there, though, that's a partnership that we have with our Loma Linda forensic pediatricians. And I've gone to the multidisciplinary team meeting where we discuss cases like this for probably about 5 years now. There's so much education in hearing that and hearing the doctor explain how this is caused, all these different things that I have learned, that would change my perspective. And to be honest, I'm a little more jaded now. You know, it just to be honest and transparent with you. Yes?
Couple questions. Was it in like your job description to kind of find out whether she was having thoughts of letting him back into the home after he was out of jail, and then was it part of his probation to stay away from the home?
So our case was closed. CFS was out of their lives when he got out of jail because he didn't get services. She did. She did her services like this. Mm-hmm. So her case closed really fast, I think within a year. And then probably within the next 2 years is when he got out of jail. So the department wasn't made aware. There's one, we can't invade so let's say I'm like, I don't want to say obsessed, but like I'm like really invested in this family. It's a total violation of privacy for me working for CFS to go and knock or call or contact somebody that we don't have an open referral or open case on. That's absolutely inappropriate. Now, if someone clued us in, like, hey, mom's acting like her mom and dad that she still lived with, I don't know what's wrong with them. If they had any idea and called in a referral to the hotline, then we're on it. Then it's okay to do so. It wouldn't necessarily be me, it'd be whoever got that referral. Let's say for whatever reason the case drug open and it was still open when he got out of jail. Yes, the social worker could be looking into that. What was the second prong of your question?
I was curious, like when it first happened, when.
Oh, like whether.
Old.
No, she was not going to get back with him.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I was like best friends with her, but not in a inappropriate violation of code of ethics way. But on a case like that, you spend so much time talking and re-talking and look at the pictures. Ugh, that's where you're like awake for hours and hours. My deputy at the time, which was my boss's boss's boss, actually even interviewed the mom with me. I don't know why, but nevertheless, that's what a high-profile case it was. So, I mean, I grilled her so many times because, yes, if she would have said, it's not his fault, or I don't know, whatever, name the excuse, done, no FR. And those were the little clues I was looking for. And all I had was my picture, which was clue enough. But that's sometimes how you learn your lessons, which is okay. Any other questions? Okay. Nikila, thoughts? I feel like you're my resident expert.
Generally, when it comes to cases, we play with family law orders, and generally in high-profile cases like that, the judge will order a no-contact order. So to kind of answer your question, she knew.
Oh, she absolutely knew.
Yeah.
She was so smart.
Yeah.
Ugh, that woman. Yeah. Okay. So these are the no FR codes. Like I said, there's a lot of them, but sadly, one of the most common ones is number 5. Number 12 is common. You'll see a lot of social workers looking at parents' criminal history, whether they have a violent felony. And then you usually have to reference the penal code. Like at first, I wasn't sure what a violent felony is. Like I think robbery is, but burglary isn't. You know, the really bad ones are. Rape is. So you're doing all that research to see what's in your parents' history and whether it could qualify for no FR. Okay. So I'm going to move on to supervisor land. So one of the first things I did as a brand new supervisor and as I got social workers in and out of my unit is setting expectations. And if you read anything about leadership, that's what you're going to see is number 1. Set expectations so people know what they're looking to do. And my 2 major expectations are be honest and be ethical. And same thing, like, I don't know if those are anyone else's main ethics or expectations when starting a unit, but to me it's paramount because we're going to make mistakes. But as long as your staff are honest and ethical, we can kind of get around anything else. And really, for the most part, I never had any issues with staff. Thank you very much. That's woo. So with that, you're going to sign a lot of documentation, a lot of court reports. You're going to have people consult with you. And social workers, we love to tell a story. You come in to consult, and we got to tell the whole story, just like I had to tell you that whole story right before. But being a supervisor, you have to figure out what questions you need to ask. Because it's not that your staff are going to withhold anything from you. Sometimes there's so many details they need help, getting at that information. Is there something about withholding facts where maybe you ask a question and they aren't honest with you, or they just haven't got to that part of the story? So there's a big difference there. Luckily, I didn't have a lot of staff that were withholding things from me. The other thing is there's other types of supervisors. So there's always a joke probably in every office about supervisors that are going to read your report. So you have deadlines. You have a caseload of 30, 40, whatever is going on in the department right now. You have a deadline. Your court report's due by, whatever time o'clock. You run it into your supervisor. You want that signature on the back page. You're never going to get that from me, as I'm going to read your court report because there's a statement and expectation. I lost the eraser. On every court report, it's basic, that under penalty of perjury, you're signing this court report. Well, I take that serious because I've never been to jail. I don't really want to go to jail. I don't think I would be very good in jail. But you're going to have social workers give you side eye and be very upset. Like, oh my gosh, you will not sign my report. No, I'm not. I'm going to read it. And I recommend when y'all are supervisors, you do the same thing. And I remember one time I was covering my peer, so that means I have double work. And the list of reports is growing. You know, there's like a, so as people come in, I put it on the bottom. That's fair. And as I was not reading them fast enough, people would come in and take the report out. Okay, well, that's fine, because there are supervisors that are just going to sign. County council has told me some stories with county council or the attorneys that represent the county. And they've told me they've called, because county council works by the same way. So they will call a supervisor, hey, you know, you signed off on this report. We have some concerns about X, Y, Z. Oh, I didn't read it, I just signed it, which I don't know why you would say that out loud. I don't know why you would say it to our attorney, but nevertheless, they say it. That doesn't make any of us look good, you know? Just, even if you skim it, and I'll be honest, as I learned my workers and kind of built that trust, and I knew they were ethical and honest, I didn't have any concerns, you can read things a lot faster. I had one new worker tell me, you're the only one that gives me like corrections back. And she was a phenomenal worker, so she actually liked that, which, you know, was amazing. But what it told her, and she told me, was that you read my report. And like we started off with, if you're going to do all that work and write all those words down, gosh, don't you want somebody to at least eyeball it for you? Especially when you're brand new or newish, or just want to be like, hey, does this look right? You know, I was kind of winging it. I'm not sure. There's comfort in knowing that somebody has read your work. But as future supervisors, you're going to get, and to me, that's another ethical dilemma. I mean, I know we might all sign off on something a little quickly without reading all those fine details, but you got to be cautious because the one that you do is going to be the one that gets you in trouble. As supervisors, you can be called to testify, especially if you have a worker that goes out on leave, medical leave, vacation, I don't know, name it. It's you. You're going. And you can't get up there and be like, oh, I don't know the case. Excuse 1, excuse 2. No, you signed the report. This is the judge, and these are attorneys. It's up to you. Makes sense? Pretty common sense, right? Yeah, but you'll experience it. Doesn't this make everybody interested in coming to work for child welfare? Oh, good. That's really good. Any questions about any of that stuff? No? Good. Okay, so we're going to get into some heavier stuff. Let me see. So I included Appendix A. This is from our handbook. This is pretty just basic penal code. I will say I noticed last week that you're going to see that pages 3 and 4 are exactly the same. Guess there needs to be a policy book provision on that. Oopsie daisy. So this is all your penal code definitions. Well, not all of them, not every single penal code. But this is a lot of penal code definitions. We're going to touch on mandated reporter. When you're in school, is everybody a mandated reporter? Yes? Okay. I was just curious. But it's also going to give you the definitions for some of the child, like physical abuse. This is the penal code definition for physical abuse. And perinatal substance abuse, that's a big one we're going to touch on in the end. Not the most important one, but one that we're going to talk about right now is substantiated, inconclusive, and unfounded. So that's how we disposition an allegation. So we talked about earlier our physical abuse example where a child has marks or bruises. So I think before we really enforced, the penal code and understood that the penal code is a definition that guides us how to disposition this. I think we kind of just went with our gut sometimes, and I'll be honest, that includes me, especially in some older days. So I would let some bias come into how I made the decision. So they didn't mean to hurt the child. It was that one-time incident. Child was back-talking. Mom slaps the child. They're very cooperative. They engage in services. I'm going to unfound it. Very common example, but it's not unfounded. Let's say when she backhanded her or whatever, she busted her lip. She caused physical abuse. But then it gets compounded. Mom's a nurse. So what's going to child abuse hit do to a nurse? It's not going to be good. And as social workers, we feel bad. We have this moral compass that I think not everybody has. So we start to feel bad. So we're like, oh, we'll just go inconclusive. The law gives us some definitions, which that should give us some comfort as social workers. We're basing it on the law. Like, I'm sorry that this happened, but X, Y, and Z happened. This is what has, it's substantiated. The other thing that happens is, so they get this CACI hit. Does everybody know what a CACI hit is? Child Abuse Central Index. So when you go to apply for social work job, lots of jobs, they're going to pull your CACI. So that's when you do your fingerprints. They're going to run you through DOJ. So if you have a CACI hit, you probably can't work with the department. Probably can't be a bus driver, school teacher, nurse, anything that put a risk depending on that field you're going into. So in our hypothetical situation, if mom's a pediatric nurse and backhanded her kid and caused a mark or a bruise, that could be a scary situation for her livelihood and for her family. But they have a course of action. They can file a grievance. And that's something that I oversee, which they get a hearing. It's an informal hearing. There's not a judge. And basically it's looked at, is there enough evidence to substantiate the allegation? It's kind of a checks and balances. So social workers, that should make us feel better that we're just doing our job, but it's a difficult decision. And I see our social workers struggle with it every day. To take it a step further, something we've really been struggling with for a long time is CACI hits on children. So, any idea what I mean by that? No? Say it. A child perpetrated on another minor. So one of the first ones I had like that, I was a supervisor, and the investigation was this child had perpetrated on another child, I think on the school bus, sexual abuse, and hurt this other child. There was a moderate age difference. I don't remember exactly. I want to say like 12 and 6, so preteen and then kind of an elementary age child. And when we looked at it, this was the third act that we knew of. There was also an act at school where he hurt a little kid in the bathroom, and then one, I think, at daycare. So I'm like, wow. So my social worker does a great investigation, and mom is besides herself. She doesn't know what to do. She's gotten this, her child all these services, and I mean, it was really, I felt for her because she really did not know what else to do. So we referred her to some services in Rialto that had a sexual abuse component. But ultimately, the decision was, we're going to substantiate sexual abuse. The burden for sexual abuse substantiation had been met, which is very low. That was the thing I was going to touch with you guys on. If you read substantiated, it says something about more likely than not. No. Yeah, more likely than not. Oh, good. So I think of that as 51%. That's so little. That's a very low burden of proof. So that's all you need to have it to happen, to get it substantiated. So we were going to substantiate on this little 12-year-old that has had 3 victims so far that the department knows of. But do we give him a khaki hit? You know, do we find him to be a threat to the public? Well, I said yes. I was over it. I was upset with this little guy. But that makes us feel uncomfortable and causes an ethical dilemma on, you know, this guy's 12 years old. He's going to have this khaki hit. This is going to affect his whole life. Yes, I understand that. Something to weigh and consider. But the law in 2013, it was just implemented that if there is a child perpetrator that doesn't have any subsequent acts, so let's envision this little guy, this was his first act, and he had nothing else for 10 years, it can come off his criminal record. Not his criminal record, comes off his record. So I would have to pull back the khaki, which is great. Because as a social worker, I like that. Okay, this might not ruin his life. Maybe this is a one-time thing, and I misjudged it, versus maybe somebody that needs a little more serious services. The other part of the khaki law, which I didn't include for you, is that once you get to be 100 years old, you can also come off khaki, which I guess 100-year-olds can't be perpetrators. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I guess they feel like you're too old at 100. We're going to take you off. I thought it was kind of funny, but I feel like there can still be a 100-year-old weirdo, but nevertheless. But to focus on the kids, so it comes off in 10 years. But I'll tell you, it's something that the department feels like you could interview 10 people in the department about, no, kids should not have a khaki hit. Other people, yes, kids should have a khaki hit. So some things that we look at is like the force, the intent. Was it experimental? Someone gave me an example of like 2 toddlers playing doctor. No, you're not going to give the toddler a khaki hit. Of course not. It's like experimental play. You get a lot of referrals on that. Those should be kind of weeded out, but it's very normal, age-appropriate behavior that you can talk with, you know, consult if you're not quite sure yourself. But when we're talking about, you know, a teenager forcibly raping a younger child, that's a whole different story than 2 toddlers, you know, playing doctor or whatever they do. See, of course, understand the difference. Yes. Any feeling about that? About this child abuse central index, these khakis on minors? No?
Was the child's like sexual history taken into account as well? Like if he had sexual
Yes. Great question. Absolutely, it should be. On the one that I'm thinking of regarding the 3 victims, he didn't disclose any sexual abuse, but boys don't always disclose as quickly as girls. The other thing he did disclose was this fascination and kind of, I would even say obsession with pornography, that his mom, he didn't disclose he found it at home. I forget where he did, but his mom was like traumatized about, but he was pulling it up on his device, whatever he had, which is like crazy, you know, just that like, you have this preteen kid obsessed with pornography, and he's got it like a cell phone, you know, and his mom was working on monitoring that. But yes, absolutely interviewing. Because that's another thing people feel very strong, and I've tried to be mindful not to say it, is calling a minor a perpetrator. And I'll tell you, it's a bad habit of mine. But many of them are victims. You know, that's the reality. So taking that into consideration. Yeah?
I have a question. So a lot of some of the kids that I work with are post-adoption, so they were foster youth.
Yeah.
And I've had a few where like literally after 18 months of intensive treatment, the parents can't be happy.
Yep.
Like the kids they need to stay. If they give them back,
yes,
because there's limitations, do they get a khaki hit, or is that
No, I think it's I'm trying to think of what's the allegation, Nikila? Child with no caregiver.
Yeah.
A
If
G?
they're in an adoptive home, we do a G and basically say that the child's behaviors or needs exceed their ability to care for.
And that's not a khaki hit. No, it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse. Who knew that? Oh, very good. Which, yeah.
Do you see a lot of emotional abuse?
No, emotional abuse is hard to prove. You have to connect it to that the child's exhibiting behavior and needs some documentation on that. The example I like to give is like a child that's been sexually abused and is cutting. Like that's a good connection. And let's say sexually abused by her father. That one exhibiting that behavior and then having a therapist connect it. But it's hard, and that's a C allegation in court. It's really hard to prove, and even in court. We also connect it a lot of times to domestic violence, because again, I think we feel that, of course, two parents engaging in domestic violence is causing some emotional abuse to the child. I'll sometimes see it on like babies, like a small, a baby. It's going to be hard because you need somebody to say that the child's exhibiting some emotional behavior, and you're just not going to get it.
Significant delay with no organic.
Maybe.
Like, exposed to that, maybe. I mean, I never got that. I could give that to.
Yeah, it's hard, and then you need a doctor to say that, or therapist, somebody. Yeah, that's really difficult. Any other questions on sexual abuse? And yes.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So let's say a minor is getting like a khaki Pokemon, but after he turns 18, would that still follow him?
So it'll follow him for 10 years if he got it post 2013. So let's say it happens today. In 10 years, so when he's 22, somebody will work a list, probably me. I'll probably be doing the same thing in 10 years. So I'll pull a list of all the minors that got khaki hits. And then what I'll have to do is I'll have to go into our database and see if he or she had any other incidences that we're aware of. If it's no, it comes off. So if this person is 12, it's going to come off at 22. Okay, makes sense? It's a little tricky. Or at 100. God willing, he lives that long. He or she lives that long. Yeah, of course.
So what incidents would we don't mind to retain for like or the 22-year-old to retain?
To keep it. So the example I gave, the one that had 3 victims, like that. So if there was multiple incidences called into the child abuse hotline that we substantiated. Pardon?
Within the 10-year frame?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think?
Yes.
Makes sense?
It makes sense. I agree in terms of, let's say, like assault, but in terms of, let's say, like battery or violence, but there's also constitute as the reason to keep that hit. So that's not to decide, let's say, a sexual incident, but is there other incidents that might constitute as reasons why to keep the khaki hit on the community?
Physical, emotional, and sexual. And I would say sexual abuse is the most common. I don't see us giving a lot of khaki hits for physical abuse. I can't even think of one. So meaning like let's say a teenager beat up anybody, I guess. I don't see that very often. Even when you see mutual combat between like a teen and a mom and dad, I still don't see that we add physical abuse to the minor and give them a khaki hit. It's usually sexual abuse, and it's usually onto that there's been a perpetration onto like a younger child, a delayed child. The emotional abuse, I've never seen. They're usually kids usually aren't emotionally abusing anybody. Maybe trying, but they're really not doing that. They're just being kids. Does it kind of answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. The most common one is sexual abuse. So as long as there's no other acts, then we pull it off. And like I said, this just went into effect 2013, so I have to give it 10 years to, I don't know, for it to first start. So it'll be kind of curious what it looks like in 2023. Like, I have no idea how many we're doing. I still think we don't like to give kids khaki hits as social workers. So, time for break? So they usually get, what do you say?
4 minutes, because then it's like 50 minutes.
Oh, 4 minutes?
2 minutes,
Okay.
you should be back early.
How about till 4:30? But I'll start at 4, is that 4:30? Yeah, but I'll start at 4:30. So it's like 12, I don't know.